David and Andrew here. What's the scientific breakthrough this week?
Current Biology magazine released a scientific study that links the DNA of modern-day Native Americans to a group of people who used to live in the caves of Yunnan, China. The Red Deer Caves. Here is a photo depiction of what they look like.
All right, so what is new about this information that is on top of the fact that, Native Americans crossed the Bering Strait?
Well, basically, it just says that there's a third group of people, not just Siberians, not just Central Asians, but people from essentially modern-day Southeast Asia, because, the Red Deer Caves, it borders Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam. They're the ones that became Native Americans.
Man, let's talk about this, David. I think there's a lot of identity questions that come into play. Main reactions that people had on the internet, like the different groups.
Okay, we had to go first to the Native American subreddit. Right. Basically, they were like kind of rolling their eyes like, oh, great. They're just another thing to sort of like take us away from who we are, because, when the white man came and like killed us all or took our land, they were kind of like saying, oh, well, you guys never really belonged here anyway.
Right, and then now people are like joking about like, oh, what are they gonna like call us Chinese now?
Right, or what? The Chinese are gonna claim us. I don't want to be Chinese. I'm Native American. And by the way, I don't think this study invalidates their identity. I totally think they should feel free, and they rightfully should identify as Native American.
What are like some European, like British responses?
Some people are like, I think this is like quite, normal knowledge to me. I think we've known this for like 100 years. If you look at a Chinese and you look at a Native American, they look quite similar.
And I think it's pretty funny because British people, they're more familiar with like Europeans migrating to different places than even Americans are.
Yeah.
Because Americans are always like centered around like, oh, America's like the center of the world. But then British are like, well, you guys came from us. Don't forget.
Yeah, but then white Americans, and obviously I'm sure there's a range of responses, but one was like, hey man, I don't give a damn. They could have came straight from Beijing 10 years ago. We came over here. We won. This is our land.
Meanies, man. What about like kind of maybe Chinese people, or maybe particularly people from Yunnan? They might be feeling like kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, hey, we got roots to the Native Americans to North America. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Chinese people probably in the scientific community are just glad they made a big discovery, but people in Yunnan, like you said, they're really excited to see this link, and I can see why, because Andrew, a lot of the people who live in the mountains of Yunnan right now that are sort of these like tribal mountain people, they still have native customs and a lot of things that visually are similar to the Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you count like Taiwan, and then like you're talking about indigenous cultures from around the world, especially when it comes to kind of like people who are linked to Asia, a lot of the culture is still kind of similar.
Yeah.
At least the old traditional like clothing that they wear.
And it's really weird. It goes along like latitude. So for example, if you look at ancient Siberians and then you look at Alaskans, it's really similar. And then you go one notch level lower and maybe like First Nations and Central Asians. You know what I mean? There's more of a linkage, and then you kind of just go all the way down, because obviously if the migration pattern went all the way down through Mexico, all the way down into Peru, into South America, that's like all one like link of like one or three groups of people.
Right. So I mean, I guess, should this affect how people feel? Because we're talking about 14,000 years ago, human migration, generations upon generations. People probably didn't know why they were migrating, or I don't know if they knew where they were going, because they went through Siberia, which was super cold, and then they could have just stopped and set up shop in California, which would have been great too. But they kept going all the way down.
Everybody just wouldn't want to stop in Santa Barbara or San Diego.
Yeah. But like, what does this stuff matter, or who does it matter to?
Bruh. doesn't matter.
Why you always lying? Stop fucking lying. For real.
Because most people in America don't even study history. They look at life between like 50 to 100 years max.
Right.
So as far as like America goes, it doesn't matter.
You're still lying.
And not only that, like we said, unfortunately, you know, the Native Americans, I guess like they were on the losing end of the battle with the Europeans for America by a long shot. So I guess even if they did descend, like we said, you know, it's back to that, like that white guys, I don't care if they came from Indonesia, Borneo, y'all don't know nothing. We came and we won. We won the game.
Damn.
That's messed up, right? But that's how, like, sort of some people see it.
Bruh.
And I would say this. For me, my major takeaways are a couple things. One, it made me consider the ancient link between sort of like your, you know, ancient Austronesian costumes, Zhuang, Dai people, and Native Americans. Some of the totem poles look the same. Really, like, striking. Okay, number two, it made me think about the link between Asians and Latinos, not only in an ancient sense, like I just said, but also a modern sense. Because even though Latinos nowadays are probably, a lot of them are, I guess, heavily mixed with like Spanish blood from Spain. You know, especially the indigenous ones, I'm like, oh man, we all like kind of went through the same situations. Political identities developed in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So there's a lot of modern day shared history as well. And then it kind of made me think about like the collaborations that we have between Native Americans and Asians. Like,
Oh, you mean like the modern day ones?
yeah, the modern day one. For example, the movie Wind Talkers, about the Navajo Indians helping the Americans fight against the Japanese, but there's a lot of really good scenes in there. One of them, you know, some of the white soldiers, they don't trust the Navajo people because they're like, they just look like nips to me. They look like Japanese to me. And then remember the Navajo guys like, I do look just like them.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then-
because they do location. Yeah, in the movie.
And then obviously that was directed by John Woo, who's Chinese. Andrew, Disney Pocahontas looks like a Filipino ABG.
Yeah, I mean, the way they drew her, for sure. I mean, I'm not saying Disney is always the most accurate, but Pocahontas looked very Asian. Her eyes were kind of like...
I heard that there was some debate in Disney of which tribe they should make her look like, because different Native American tribes look more or less Asian. Obviously, the more further south you go.
It's all a hijack.
Well, what is the best current collaboration right now?
Oh, for sure, the casino.
Yeah.
Because the government sort of like, I guess, I don't know if they really do, but they kind of feel bad about taking the indigenous people's land.
Wow.
So they give them the casinos. But then the main people who pump money into the casinos and work at the casinos are actually Asians.
Yeah, man.
And specifically, probably Viets or Chinese Viets.
Dude, we didn't
Or
grow up
Chinese.
too far from this spot called the Muckleshoot Reservation. And in the reservation, one, you can buy firecrackers and you can go to the casinos.
Andrew,
Just
if Chinese
wow.
Viets are the main people at the casinos, and Yunnan, China is sort of in this Chinese Viet zone, you could look like a little Inuit boy, specifically from like Alaska. And and some of our Southeast Asian friends, Andrew, if you put like a feather headdress around Richie's head, he could look like a Cherokee.
Yeah.
Bruh.
For me, jokes aside for a second, for me...
That was with all due respect.
Yeah. I mean, hey, these are some funny theories, by the way. With taking that aside, though, I think that ultimately, if something from like 10,000 years ago even affects your identity today, then ultimately, how far are you going to take it back? Because if we take it back 100,000 years ago, we're all from East Africa. So I'm saying,
Hell
like,
no.
of course, we're all African if you want to go back that far. So how far do you want to go back? 50 years, 500 years, 5,000 years? You name it. It's up to you.
Hell no.
Obviously, I think this type of information affects different people differently. I think a lot of people won't care and I think that's generally the right answer too. But also,
Most people don't even care what happened 150 years ago, let alone 15,000 years ago, let alone 150,000 years ago.
150 years ago, if you have a picture of it, I don't know. It matters a little
Yo,
bit
man,
more.
your ancestor was a Neanderthal. My ancestor was a Denizen. The Denivins and the Neanderthals, they had beef. Or were they homies?
Yeah.
Just
But
wow.
by the way, I don't think anybody out there actually thinks Native Americans are Chinese, obviously.
Why
because,
you always
guys,
lying?
but there was a funny joke when they were like, oh, so what? Is China gonna go claim America as its ancestral land? that was a funny thought.